Hello, it's Miss Beatty here, and we are learning to convert fractions into decimals. So we are still working with our tenths today. So this is just a quick reminder that a decimal is a way of writing a number that is not whole, and you are only working with part of a number. And that is why our fractions here and our decimals here are similar. They are in the same topic because they both represent part of a number. So we are still focusing on our tenths column today as part of our place value. We're still looking at tenths, okay? And this is any number that's after the decimal point, okay? So numbers after a decimal point become decimal fractions, and we know that they have to be out of 10, 100, or 1,000. So we're still focusing on our tenths. We want to consolidate that knowledge before we move on to our hundredths, okay? So the sort of questions that are going to come up in your activity sheet are ones like this. So for example, write this shape as a mixed number and then write it as a decimal. So to write it as a mixed number is essentially just writing it as a fraction. So what you need to do is you need to count how many whole parts do you have of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got one whole part of 10, so I need to write one whole part down here. I know it's out of 10, so my denominator is going to be 10. And we've got how many parts? 1, 2, 3 parts. So I have got 1 and 3 tenths. One whole, 10 parts in total, and 3 parts that are shaded in purple. So 1 and 3 tenths. To write this as a decimal, all you're doing is writing 1.3, okay? Because essentially this is the same as 13, okay, over 10. 13 over 10. But we know that if we did 13 divided by 10, like this, okay, our decimal point has to move back one space because we're dividing by 10 to go here, and it equals 1.3. So we've written it as a mixed number, 1 and 3 tenths, and we've written it as a decimal, 1.3. Let's look at another example. Example number 2. So write as a mixed number and then as a decimal. How many whole parts of 10 do we have? We've got 1 here and 1 here. So in total, we have 2. 2 whole parts of 10, okay? 2 whole parts of 10. And we've got written 10 as our total, as our denominator, because that's how many parts there are, okay? 2 whole parts of 10. And we've got 1, 2, 3 parts shaded in. So we've got here 2 and 3 tenths. 2 and 3 tenths. How do we write that as a decimal? Well, just so we're clear, that's essentially like writing 23 over 10. And I know that if I did 23 divided by 10, remember that decimal point has to move back one space. So it moves to here, so it becomes 2.3. So a decimal for this question would be 2.3. 2 parts, 2 whole parts, and 3 tenths, okay? 3 tenths. 2 and 3 tenths is the same as 2.3. Let's do one more example. Write as a mixed number and then as a decimal. So how many whole parts do we have? We've got 1, 2, 3. So we've got 3 whole parts of 10, always out of 10. We're working with tenths today, so everything will be out of 10. 3 whole parts of 10 and 2 fractions of that are shaded in purple. So we've got 3 and 2 tenths. So that's like writing 32 over 10. So I need to do 32 divided by 10 to figure out what is going to look like as a decimal. So my decimal point needs to move back one space in between the 3 and the 2 to become 3.2. And I know that I'm definitely right because I've got 3 whole parts of 10 here and 2 tenths. Okay, 2 tenths, 3.2. Another question that will come up in your activity sheets is one like this. Write this mixed fraction as a decimal. So it's very similar to what we've just done here, apart from we've not got a shape to look at, okay? This is the same as saying, okay, 1.3. We've got 1 in the tens column, 1 in our ones column, and 3 in our tenths column. 1 and 3 tenths, okay? Because it's like 13 divided by our 10. And we know that if we move our decimal point back one space, it becomes 1.3, okay? We'll look at this example here. Write this fraction as a decimal, 3 and 12 tenths. Okay, so that's like writing 312 divided by 10. Okay, again, all you're doing is moving back our decimal point one space. So the answer is 31.2. 31.2. Okay, so we've got 31.2 here. For this example here, it's essentially saying 64 divided by 10. And again, if we move our decimal point back one space, it becomes 6.4. Okay, 6.4. So no matter how many numbers you're working with, you are only moving your decimal point back one space to get your answer. So 6 and 4 tenths is 6.4. 3 and 12 tenths is 31.2. Another example is looking at a number line. We looked at this in our last video where we had a number line from 0 all the way to 1. You will be given one that's maybe starting at 1 and then working your way to 2 or to 3 or to 4. But you've got to remember that there's numbers in between 1 and 2 that are not whole numbers, they are parts. So for example, from 0 to get to 1, you go 0.1, 0.2, 0.3 and so on. Here's 0.5, which you know is a half. Remember, these are all out of 10. So for example, 0.1 is the same as 1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths, 4 tenths, and so on. So from 1 to get to 2, we would write 1.1. Oops, it's quite difficult to write on this. 1.1, 1.2. Okay, so there's 1.1, 1.2. Okay, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, 1.9, and 2. And so on, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and so on. So that question will come up in your activity sheet and you will have to identify what the decimal is on the number line, okay? Now, you might be given a problem-solving question, something like this. Collect 10 tokens for a free bar of chocolate. Write how many bars you can have with 22 tokens. So if I had 22 tokens and I know that I need to only collect 10 to get a free bar of chocolate, all you need to work out is, right, well, what is 22 divided by 10? Okay, 22 divided by 10. And again, like the other questions that we looked at and the other examples, you're just moving your decimal point back one space. So you know that you can get 2.2 bars of chocolate with 10 tokens. What happens if you had 92 tokens? It is the exact same sum, apart from you're just using different numbers. 92 divided by 10, your decimal point needs to move back one space to become 9.2. So I can get 9.2 bars of chocolate with 10 tokens that I've collected. When you're dividing a two-digit number by 10, remember you are just moving the decimal point back one space. So 23 becomes 2.3 if you divide it by 10. 44 divided by 10, let's move our decimal point back one space, becomes 4.4. What happens if you had a huge number like 1,304? 1,234, divide that by 10, okay? Your decimal point, again, only needs to move back one space. So it becomes 123.4. And again, if any number, for example, 70, and we know that 70 divided by 10 is just 7, because 7 times 10 is 7, any number with a 0 on the end of it, when you're dividing by 10, you just knock the 0 off. But again, if you move the decimal point back one, it would be 7.0, and 7.0 is the same as 7. I hope this video makes sense. It can be a little bit tricky to begin with, but once you get into the tasks, you'll hopefully start to understand them, okay? Just remember, when you're working with tenths, you're moving your decimal point back one space to make a different number, okay? So have a go at the activity sheets and let us know how you get on in Teams, okay? Good luck.